Long ago, in the quiet streets of old London, before cars, electricity, and glowing city lights, a small lantern burned softly every evening. The lantern belonged to an elderly watchman named Thomas. Every night, as the sun disappeared behind the rooftops, Thomas would walk through the narrow cobblestone streets carrying his lantern. The warm golden light gently danced across the stones, guiding late travelers safely home. London was a very different place in those days. Horses pulled wooden carts through the streets. Bakers woke before sunrise to prepare fresh bread. Shopkeepers opened their doors slowly each morning, greeting neighbors with friendly smiles. Thomas enjoyed his simple life. He knew every corner of the neighborhood and every family who lived there. Children waved to him during the day, and merchants often offered him a warm cup of tea before his evening rounds. One cool autumn evening, a light fog drifted across the city. The streets became quiet as people settled into their homes. Thomas lit his lantern and began his usual walk. The glow of the lantern reflected softly in the mist. It was peaceful and calm. The distant sound of church bells echoed through the night air. As Thomas walked, he thought about how much the city had changed during his lifetime. New buildings had appeared. Markets had grown larger. More people arrived each year, hoping for better opportunities. Yet some things remained the same. The river still flowed quietly through the city. The moon still rose above the rooftops. And each evening, Thomas still carried his lantern through the sleeping streets. Hours passed gently. The fog slowly lifted, revealing a sky filled with stars. Thomas paused on a small bridge overlooking the river. The water shimmered under the moonlight. A cool breeze drifted past him. The city seemed almost asleep. He could see a few lights glowing from distant windows. Somewhere, a cat wandered along a wall. A baker was already preparing for the next morning's work. Thomas smiled. Life moved slowly in those days. There were no buzzing phones, no flashing screens, and no crowded highways. People spent evenings talking by candlelight, reading books, or listening to stories beside the fireplace. As midnight approached, Thomas completed his final round. The streets were safe and quiet. He returned home to his small cottage near the edge of the city. Hanging the lantern by the door, he looked once more at the peaceful streets outside. The moon shone softly overhead. The city rested, and soon Thomas rested too. The lantern's gentle glow faded into the darkness, while London slept beneath a blanket of stars. Nearly 3,000 years ago, a young boy named Amun lived in a small village along the banks of the Nile River in ancient Egypt. Every morning as the sun rose above the horizon, villagers went to their fields. The Nile provided water that made the land fertile, allowing wheat and barley to grow in the middle of the vast desert. Amun's father was a farmer. Before sunrise, he crossed the river in a small wooden boat to work in the fields. Sometimes Amun joined him and admired the beauty of the peaceful landscape. One evening, after a long day, Amun sat beside the Nile. The setting sun painted the sky with shades of gold and orange. Its reflections shimmered gently on the river's surface. The air was calm. Birds were returning to their nests. Villagers slowly made their way home. Amun remembered the stories told by his grandfather. He often said that the Nile had sustained Egypt for thousands of years. Without the river, there would have been no great civilization in the surrounding desert. As darkness arrived, small boats drifted quietly across the water. Fishermen and farmers were returning home after a day's work. Stars slowly appeared in the sky. The village became peaceful and quiet. Oil lamps glowed softly inside homes. Families gathered together for dinner before settling down for the night. After eating, Amun climbed onto the roof of his house. During warm nights, many Egyptians slept on their rooftops beneath the open sky. He looked upward. Thousands of stars sparkled above him. The Nile flowed silently nearby. In the distance, an owl called softly into the night. Amun slowly closed his eyes. He wondered if, thousands of years in the future, people would still tell stories about the Nile. The river would continue to flow, the stars would continue to shine, and people would continue to dream. As the peaceful night embraced ancient Egypt, history quietly moved forward through the centuries. The year was 1878. A peaceful autumn evening was settling over the vast grasslands of Kansas. The golden light of the setting sun slowly faded across the prairie, painting the horizon in shades of orange, pink, and deep blue. Far from any large city stood a small farmhouse surrounded by endless fields. This was home to a 17-year-old boy named Jack Henry. Jack lived a simple life. Each morning he woke with the sunrise. Each evening he rested beneath a sky full of stars. Life in the American West was very different from today. There were no smartphones, no electric lights, no busy highways, no glowing screens. When the sun went down, darkness covered the land, and people relied on lanterns, fireplaces, and moonlight. On this particular evening, Jack sat quietly on a wooden fence near the family farm. A gentle breeze moved through the tall prairie grass. In the distance, several horses grazed peacefully. The world seemed calm and unhurried. Jack watched the sunset. He had seen thousands of sunsets before, yet each one felt unique. The colors changed, the clouds shifted, the wind carried different sounds. Nature never repeated itself exactly. His father often told him, "The most valuable thing in life is peace." At 17 years old, Jack was only beginning to understand what that meant. As darkness approached, a distant train whistle echoed across the prairie. The sound traveled for miles through the open landscape. America was changing rapidly during those years. Railroads stretched farther west. New towns appeared. Families arrived seeking new opportunities. Businesses grew. The frontier slowly became connected to the rest of the nation. Yet despite these changes, Jack's small farm remained quiet and unchanged. Soon his mother's voice called from the farmhouse. Dinner was ready. Jack walked back toward the warm glow of the house. Inside, the family gathered around a wooden table. Fresh bread sat beside a pot of vegetable soup. The simple meal filled the room with comforting aromas. As they ate, they shared stories about the day's work. They laughed. They talked about future plans. And they enjoyed the comfort of being together. After dinner, Jack's father began telling stories from his own childhood. He described a time when there were no nearby towns. Thomas enjoyed his simple life. He knew every corner of the neighborhood and every family who lived there. Children waved to him during the day, and merchants often offered him a warm cup of tea before his evening rounds. One cool autumn evening, a light fog drifted across the city. The streets became quiet as people settled into their homes. Thomas lit his lantern and began his usual walk. The glow of the lantern reflected softly in the mist. It was peaceful and calm. The distant sound of church bells echoed through the night air. As Thomas walked, he thought about how much the city had changed during his lifetime. New buildings had appeared. Markets had grown larger. More people arrived each year, hoping for better opportunities. Yet some things remained the same. The river still flowed quietly through the city. The moon still rose above the rooftops. And each evening, Thomas still carried his lantern through the sleeping streets. Hours passed gently. The fog slowly lifted, revealing a sky filled with stars. Thomas paused on a small bridge overlooking the river. The water shimmered under the moonlight. A cool breeze drifted past him. The city seemed almost asleep. He could see a few lights glowing from distant windows. Somewhere, a cat wandered along a wall. A baker was already preparing for the next morning's work. Thomas smiled. Life moved slowly in those days. There were no buzzing phones, no flashing screens, and no crowded highways. People spent evenings talking by candlelight, reading books, or listening to stories beside the fireplace. As midnight approached, Thomas completed his final round. The streets were safe and quiet. He returned home to his small cottage near the edge of the city. Hanging the lantern by the door, he looked once more at the peaceful streets outside. The moon shone softly overhead. The city rested, and soon Thomas rested too. The lantern's gentle glow faded into the darkness, while London slept beneath a blanket of stars.
In a small town in America lived a 16-year-old boy named Ethan Carter. Ethan's life was far from easy. His father had passed away when he was very young, and his mother worked long hours at a local diner just to keep food on the table. Their tiny apartment was old and worn out. The walls had cracks, and the roof leaked whenever it rained. Despite their hardships, Ethan always tried to stay positive. He worked after school delivering newspapers and helping neighbors with small jobs. Every day, Ethan walked past the luxurious homes on the hill and wondered what it felt like to live without worrying about money. One cold autumn afternoon, Ethan finished delivering newspapers and began walking home. The wind blew golden leaves across the sidewalk. He was tired and hungry. As he passed through a quiet park, something caught his attention. Near a wooden bench lay a black leather wallet. Ethan looked around. The park was empty. He picked up the wallet and carefully opened it. His eyes widened. Inside was more money than he had ever seen in his life. There were hundreds of dollars neatly folded inside. For a moment, Ethan's heart raced. His family desperately needed money. His mother's rent was overdue. The refrigerator was nearly empty. Nobody was around. Nobody would know. But then he remembered something his mother always said. Doing the right thing is hardest when nobody is watching. Ethan took a deep breath. He decided to find the owner. As he searched through the wallet, he found an ID card. The name on it was William Harrison. The address belonged to one of the largest mansions on the hill. Ethan stared at the card. Why would someone so rich care about losing a wallet? Still, he knew he had to return it. Little did Ethan know that this simple decision would change his life forever. That evening, he stood nervously outside the massive gates of the Harrison estate. The mansion looked like something from a movie. Tall iron gates, beautiful gardens, luxury cars, everything Ethan had only dreamed about. He pressed the intercom button. A voice answered. Yes. Ethan swallowed hard. I think I found Mr. Harrison's wallet. There was a long silence. Then the gates slowly opened. At that moment, Ethan had no idea he was about to step into a mystery that would lead him to secrets, danger, friendship, and a future beyond his wildest dreams. The iron gates slowly opened. Ethan hesitated for a moment before walking up the long driveway. The mansion was even more impressive up close. Lights glowed from every window, and a large fountain sparkled in the evening air. A tall man in a black suit opened the front door. "Are you the boy who found the wallet?" he asked. "Yes, sir," Ethan replied. The man nodded and led him inside. The mansion was breathtaking. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and expensive paintings filled every room. A few moments later, an elderly gentleman entered the room. His silver hair was neatly combed, and his sharp blue eyes immediately focused on Ethan. "Young man," he said warmly, "I'm William Harrison." Ethan handed him the wallet. "Mr. Harrison" quickly checked inside. Everything was there. Every dollar. Every card. Nothing was missing. A smile appeared on the old man's face. "Do you know how rare honesty is these days?" he asked. Ethan shrugged. "I just did what I thought was right." Mr. Harrison seemed impressed. He offered Ethan a reward. A thick envelope filled with cash. But Ethan shook his head. "I don't want a reward, sir." The room fell silent. Even the butler looked surprised. Most people would have accepted the money immediately. Mr. Harrison stared at Ethan for several seconds. Then he smiled. "You remind me of someone." "Who?" Ethan asked. "My son." The smile faded from the old man's face. "He disappeared 15 years ago." Ethan didn't know what to say. "I'm sorry." Mr. Harrison nodded slowly. "It was a long time ago, but not a day passes without me thinking about him." As they talked, Ethan noticed something strange. A photograph on the fireplace. It showed Mr. Harrison standing beside a young boy. The boy looked about Ethan's age. But what really caught Ethan's attention was what was written on the frame. "Never stop searching." Before Ethan could ask about it, a loud crash echoed somewhere upstairs. Everyone froze. Mr. Harrison's expression suddenly changed. The butler rushed toward the staircase. A few moments later he returned. "Sir," he whispered nervously, "someone was inside the study." "What?" Mr. Harrison stood up immediately. "The window is open. Whoever it was escaped." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. Someone had broken into the mansion. But why? Mr. Harrison quickly excused himself and disappeared upstairs with the butler. Ethan waited alone in the living room. Minutes later, he accidentally noticed a piece of paper lying beneath a nearby table. It must have fallen during the commotion. Curious, he picked it up. His eyes widened. The paper contained part of a map, and in the corner were 3 handwritten words. "Find the boy." Suddenly footsteps approached. Ethan quickly folded the paper. He had no idea what the map meant. But deep down, he knew this was no ordinary wallet returning visit anymore. A mystery had just begun. And somehow, Ethan was now part of it. Ethan quietly slipped the torn piece of paper into his pocket before anyone noticed. A few moments later, Mr. Harrison returned. He looked calm, but Ethan could tell something was bothering him. "I'm sorry about that interruption, Mr. Harrison said. "It's okay, sir," Ethan replied. Mr. Harrison smiled and walked him to the front door. "Thank you again for your honesty. I hope we'll meet again." Ethan nodded and left the mansion. That night, Ethan sat on his bed, staring at the mysterious paper. It was definitely part of a map. A red line crossed through forests, roads, and what looked like an old river. But the strangest thing was the message. Find the boy. Who was the boy? And why had someone broken into the mansion looking for something? The more Ethan thought about it, the more curious he became. The next morning, he went to school but couldn't focus. During lunch, he showed the paper to his best friend, Jake. Jake's eyes grew wide. "Where did you get this?" "It's a long story," Ethan replied. Jake studied the map carefully. "Look at this." He pointed to a small symbol near the edge of the paper. It looked like a lighthouse. "I've seen this before," Jake said. "Where?" "Near Blackwater Bay. There's an abandoned lighthouse there." Ethan felt a surge of excitement. Maybe the map led there. Maybe answers were waiting. After school, Ethan and Jake rode their bikes toward Blackwater Bay. The old lighthouse stood on a rocky cliff overlooking the ocean. Its white paint had faded long ago. Broken windows faced the sea. The place looked abandoned. A rusty gate blocked the entrance. But there was enough space to squeeze through. Inside, dust covered everything. The wooden stairs creaked beneath their feet. As they climbed higher, the wind howled through broken windows. Finally, they reached the top. At first, they found nothing. Then Jake noticed something carved into the wall. A symbol. The exact same symbol that appeared on the map. Beneath it were 4 words. "The truth is buried." Suddenly, a loud noise echoed below. Footsteps. Someone else was inside the lighthouse. Ethan and Jake looked at each other. Neither had heard anyone enter. The footsteps grew closer. Slow. Heavy. Deliberate. Then a voice called out from below. "I know. You're up there." The boys froze. The voice sounded unfamiliar. And dangerous. "Come down slowly," the stranger said. "Or I'll come up." Ethan's heart pounded. Who was this person? How did they know about the map? And what secret was hidden behind the words? "The truth is buried." As the footsteps began climbing the stairs toward them, Ethan realized they were no longer just solving a mystery. They were now being hunted. The heavy footsteps continued climbing the narrow staircase. Ethan's heart pounded so loudly he could barely hear anything else. Jake whispered, "What do we do?" Ethan quickly looked around. There was only one staircase leading up. No other exit. The stranger was getting closer. Step, step, step. Then a shadow appeared around the corner. A tall man wearing a dark coat slowly emerged onto the platform. His face was partly hidden beneath a cap. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then the man looked directly at Ethan. "You're carrying something that doesn't belong to you." Ethan immediately knew he was talking about the map. "I don't know what you're talking about," Ethan replied. The man smiled. "Yes, you do." Jake took a step backward. The stranger pulled a small photograph from his pocket. When Ethan saw it, he froze. It was the same boy from the photograph in Mr. Harrison's mansion. The missing son. The boy everyone had been searching for. Where did you get that? Ethan asked. The man's expression darkened. The question is, where did you get the map? Before Ethan could answer, a loud crashing sound came from below. Everyone jumped. Another person had entered the lighthouse. Then came shouting. Several voices. The stranger suddenly looked worried. They found me. Who found you? Ethan asked. But the man ignored him. Instead, he shoved the photograph into Ethan's hand. Listen carefully. His voice became urgent. If you want the truth, go to Silver Creek Forest. What truth? The truth about William Harrison's son. Footsteps echoed from below. Several people were rushing upstairs. The stranger quickly moved toward a broken window. Ethan stared at him. Wait. But it was too late. The man climbed out onto a narrow ledge and disappeared. Seconds later, 3 men in black jackets stormed onto the platform. Where is he? One demanded. Ethan remained silent. The men searched the lighthouse but found nothing. The stranger was gone. That evening, Ethan returned home. His mind was filled with questions. He spread the photograph and map across his desk. For the first time, he looked closely at the photo. Something caught his attention. Written on the back was a date. And beneath it, a short message. If anything happens to me, Silver Creek knows the answer. Ethan stared at the words. Silver Creek again. It couldn't be a coincidence. The next morning, Ethan and Jake headed for Silver Creek Forest. The forest was miles outside town. Few people visited anymore. Tall trees blocked most of the sunlight. The deeper they walked, the quieter everything became. After nearly an hour, Jake suddenly stopped. Ethan. What? Jake pointed ahead. Hidden among the trees stood an old wooden cabin. Smoke drifted from the chimney. Someone was living there. And nailed to the front door was a symbol. The exact same symbol from the map. As Ethan stepped closer, the cabin door slowly creaked open by itself. A voice from inside said, I've been expecting you. Ethan froze. Because the voice sounded familiar. Very familiar. It sounded exactly like the voice of the missing boy from the photograph. Ethan and Jake stood frozen outside the cabin. The door remained open. The mysterious voice spoke again. Come inside. It's time you learned the truth. The boys exchanged nervous glances. Then they slowly stepped into the cabin. Inside, the room was simple but clean. A fireplace crackled in the corner. Books lined the shelves, and old maps covered a large wooden table. Standing beside the fireplace was a young man. He looked about 20 years old. Ethan immediately recognized him. The face was older, but there was no mistake. He was the same boy from the photograph in Mr. Harrison's mansion. William Harrison's missing son. Jake gasped. It can't be. The young man nodded. My name is Daniel Harrison. Ethan stared in disbelief. You're alive. Yes. Then why has everyone been searching for you for 15 years? Daniel's expression became serious. Because they don't know the whole story. Daniel invited them to sit down. For a moment, the only sound was the crackling fire. Then Daniel began his story. When I was 10 years old, someone tried to kidnap me. Ethan leaned forward. What happened? My father discovered a criminal organization that was laundering millions of dollars through fake companies. He planned to expose them. Daniel paused. They threatened our family. Jake swallowed hard. So they came after you. Daniel nodded. My father believed I would be safer if everyone thought I had disappeared. The room fell silent. Ethan couldn't believe what he was hearing. You mean? Yes, Daniel said. My disappearance was staged. For 15 years, Daniel had lived in secret. Only a few trusted people knew he was alive. But recently, someone had discovered the truth. That's why strange people were searching for him. That's why someone broke into the mansion. That's why the map existed. Someone was trying to find Daniel before he could reveal the evidence his father had hidden years ago. The evidence is still out there, Daniel said. And if it falls into the wrong hands, many dangerous people will escape justice. Ethan looked at the map. So the map leads to the evidence. Daniel nodded. But we only have part of it. Where's the rest? Daniel walked to a shelf and pulled out a metal box. Inside were 2 more torn map pieces. When combined, they revealed a larger route. But one section was still missing. A final piece. The most important piece. Without it, they couldn't find the hidden evidence. Suddenly, a loud engine roared outside. Everyone jumped. Daniel rushed to the window. His face turned pale. They found us. Several black SUVs were driving toward the cabin through the forest. At least 8 men were getting out. And they weren't alone. Leading them was the mysterious stranger from the lighthouse. But this time he wasn't running. He was pointing directly at the cabin. "They're here," Jake shouted. Daniel grabbed the map pieces. "We have to leave now." The front door shook violently. Someone was trying to break in. Boom. Another hit. The wooden frame cracked. Daniel pointed toward a hidden trapdoor beneath a rug. "Quick, this way." Ethan and Jake climbed down into a narrow underground tunnel. Daniel followed and pulled the trapdoor shut. Above them, they heard the cabin door finally splinter open. The men had entered. The chase had begun. And now Ethan was carrying the key to a secret worth millions of dollars, and powerful people were willing to do anything to get it. The tunnel was dark, cold, and narrow. Ethan could barely see a few feet ahead. Daniel switched on a small flashlight and led the way. Behind them, muffled voices echoed through the cabin above. The men were searching every room. "We don't have much time," Daniel whispered. The 3 boys hurried through the tunnel. After several minutes, they reached an old metal door hidden beneath a large oak tree deep in the forest. Daniel pushed it open. Fresh air rushed in. They were safe, for now. As they rested, Ethan finally asked the question that had been bothering him. "Who are these people?" Daniel's face became serious. "Their leader is a man named Victor Kane." "Who is he?" 15 years ago, he controlled a huge criminal network. My father gathered evidence against him." Jake frowned. "So why wasn't he arrested?" "Because the evidence disappeared before it could reach the authorities." Daniel looked down at the map. "My father hid it. And now everyone is looking for it," Ethan said. Daniel nodded. That evening, the 3 boys studied the map pieces inside an abandoned ranger station. When they combined the pieces, something new appeared. A hidden message. The words were faint but readable. "The final key lies beneath the Eagle Monument." Jake looked confused. "What's the Eagle Monument?" Daniel's eyes widened. "I know exactly where it is." The Eagle Monument stood in the center of an old mining town called Redstone. The town had been abandoned for decades. Few people ever visited. If the final map piece was hidden there, they had to get it first. The next morning, they borrowed bicycles and headed toward Redstone. The journey took hours. As they approached the abandoned town, broken buildings appeared on the horizon. Rust-covered old signs. Empty streets stretched in every direction. The place felt frozen in time. At the center of town stood a large stone eagle. The Eagle Monument. Ethan walked around it carefully. There must be something here. They searched for nearly 20 minutes. Nothing. Then Jake accidentally kicked a loose stone. A clicking sound echoed. The ground beneath the monument shifted slightly. "A secret compartment," Jake shouted. Together, they pushed aside the heavy stone slab. Inside was a small metal box. Daniel opened it. His hands trembled. Inside lay the final map piece. And something else. A sealed envelope addressed to whoever finds this. Ethan carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter from William Harrison. The letter revealed the location of the hidden evidence. But before Ethan could finish reading, a familiar voice echoed through the town square. "Thank you for finding it for us." The boys froze. They slowly turned around. Standing at the end of the street was Victor Kane himself. Tall, cold-eyed, surrounded by armed men. Victor smiled. "Now hand over the map." Ethan looked at Daniel. Daniel looked at Jake. There was only one chance. One way out. And it would require a dangerous escape through the abandoned mines beneath Redstone. Victor Kane stepped forward. Behind him stood more than a dozen men. There was no way Ethan, Jake, and Daniel could fight them. "Hand over the map," Victor said calmly. "The game is over." Daniel clenched his fists. "No." Victor smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." His men began moving forward. "Run!" Daniel shouted. The 3 boys turned and sprinted across the town square. Victor's men chased after them. Ethan could hear footsteps pounding behind him. The old mining entrance was only a few hundred feet away. If they could reach it, they might escape. The boys rushed through the broken entrance and disappeared into the darkness. Seconds later, Victor's men followed. Inside the mine, the air was cold and damp. Daniel shined his flashlight ahead. Ancient wooden supports lined the tunnels. Some looked ready to collapse at any moment. The map and William Harrison's letter were safely tucked inside Ethan's backpack. "We need to lose them," Jake said. A loud voice echoed behind them. They went this way. The pursuers were getting closer. The tunnel suddenly split into 3 directions. Daniel stopped. "We don't have time." Then Ethan noticed something on the letter. A sketch. It showed part of the mine. And a symbol marked one specific tunnel. "This way," Ethan shouted. They rushed down the left passage. The tunnel narrowed, then widened into a huge underground chamber. In the center stood an old mining elevator. Daniel's eyes widened. This wasn't on any town map. The elevator looked ancient but intact. Beside it was a rusted lever. Jake pulled it. Nothing happened. Then Daniel spotted a backup generator nearby. After several attempts, it roared to life. Lights flickered. The elevator groaned. Slowly, it began moving. Footsteps echoed again. Victor's men had entered the chamber. "There they are." The boys jumped into the elevator. The metal cage started descending deeper underground. Victor rushed forward. No. He lunged toward the elevator. But the cage dropped just out of reach. Minutes later, the elevator stopped. The boys stepped into a hidden underground room. They couldn't believe what they saw. Shelves filled the chamber. Boxes, files, hard drives, documents, everything William Harrison had collected. Years of evidence. Enough to destroy Victor Kane's entire criminal empire. Daniel smiled for the first time. "We found it." But before they could celebrate, Ethan noticed something else. A second envelope. Larger than the first. It was addressed specifically to Daniel. With shaking hands, Daniel opened it. Inside was a personal letter from his father. As he read, tears filled his eyes. "What is it?" Ethan asked. Daniel looked up. "My father knew this day would come." The letter explained everything. William Harrison had hidden the evidence years ago and created clues leading to it. But there was one final instruction. A secret even Daniel never knew. At the bottom of the page were 6 words. "Trust no one except Sarah Mitchell." Jake frowned. "Who's Sarah Mitchell?" Daniel's face turned pale. "She was my father's former assistant." "But that's impossible," Ethan said. "Why?" Daniel swallowed hard. "Because Sarah Mitchell died 10 years ago." The room fell silent. Somehow, a dead woman had become the final piece of the mystery. And outside the chamber, Victor Kane was still hunting them. The underground chamber fell silent. Daniel stared at the letter again. "Trust no one except Sarah Mitchell." The words didn't make sense. Jake shook his head. "If she died 10 years ago, why would your father write that?" "I don't know," Daniel replied. Ethan thought carefully. What if she didn't die? Daniel looked up. The possibility had never crossed his mind. Years ago, newspapers reported that Sarah Mitchell had died in a car accident. The case was closed quickly, and nobody questioned it. But now William Harrison's final message suggested otherwise. Suddenly, a sound echoed from above. Victor Kane's men had found the elevator. "We need to move," Ethan said. The boys quickly gathered the evidence. There were too many boxes to carry, but Daniel found several hard drives containing copies of everything. They packed them into backpacks and hurried through a hidden passage at the back of the chamber. The tunnel eventually led outside the mine. Night had fallen. The stars filled the sky. For the moment, they were free. The next day, they began searching for information about Sarah Mitchell. Most records ended with the same story. Car accident. Deceased. But Ethan noticed something strange. The accident report contained no photographs. No funeral records. No burial location. It was as if Sarah Mitchell had simply vanished. Jake leaned closer to the computer. "That's weird." Daniel nodded. "Very weird." Then Ethan found something. A property record. A small farmhouse located hundreds of miles away. The owner was listed under a different name. But the birth date matched Sarah Mitchell's exactly. 3 days later, the boys arrived at the farmhouse. It stood alone at the edge of a quiet valley. An old woman was watering flowers in the garden. As soon as Daniel stepped out of the car, she froze. The watering can slipped from her hands. For several seconds, neither moved. Then the woman whispered, "Daniel." Daniel's eyes widened. "You know me." The woman slowly nodded. Tears filled her eyes. I helped raise you. Daniel could barely speak. Sarah. The woman smiled sadly. Yes, she was alive. Inside the farmhouse, Sarah finally revealed the truth. 10 years ago, William Harrison discovered that Victor Kane had infiltrated powerful institutions. There were corrupt officials everywhere. The evidence wasn't enough to guarantee justice. So William made a difficult decision. He arranged for Sarah to disappear. If Victor learned she was alive, she would become a target. Sarah had spent years hiding and waiting. Waiting for the day Daniel returned. Waiting for the evidence to be found. But Sarah had another secret. One that shocked everyone. Your father is alive, she said. The room went silent. Daniel stood up so quickly his chair nearly fell over. What? Sarah nodded. William Harrison never died. Ethan couldn't believe it. Everyone thought William Harrison was still living in the mansion. But months ago, reports claimed he had disappeared after a mysterious accident. No one knew where he was. Sarah opened a drawer and removed an old photograph. On the back was an address. A safe house, she said. That's where your father was supposed to go. Daniel stared at the address. For years, he had dreamed of seeing his father again. Now there was a chance. A real chance. That night, as they prepared to leave, none of them noticed the small drone hovering high above the farmhouse. Miles away, Victor Kane watched a live video feed. And for the first time in years, he smiled. Because now he knew exactly where Daniel was. And he was preparing his final move. The next morning, Ethan, Jake, Daniel, and Sarah left the farmhouse before sunrise. They were heading to the safe house. If Sarah was right, Daniel would finally see his father again after 15 years. But none of them knew that Victor Kane was already one step ahead. The safe house was hidden deep in the mountains. After hours of driving, they finally reached a narrow dirt road. At the end stood a small wooden cabin surrounded by pine trees. Daniel's heart raced. This is it. They stepped out of the car and slowly approached the cabin. The front door was slightly open. Ethan felt uneasy. Something wasn't right. The place was too quiet. Daniel pushed the door open. The cabin appeared empty. Dust covered the furniture. No signs of anyone living there. Then Ethan noticed a piece of paper on a table. Daniel grabbed it. The message was short. You're late. Suddenly, a loud click echoed through the room. Everyone froze. Jake looked down. A red light was blinking beneath the floorboards. A trap, Ethan whispered. Before anyone could react, steel shutters slammed over every window and door. The cabin became a prison. Then a familiar voice echoed through hidden speakers. Victor Kane. Welcome, Daniel. Victor's laughter filled the room. You've spent years looking for answers. Now you'll get them. The wall opposite them suddenly lit up. A giant screen appeared. Victor Kane was broadcasting live from an unknown location. I knew you would come here eventually, he said. You followed the clues exactly as planned. Daniel stepped forward. Where is my father? Victor smiled. Closer than you think. Then the screen changed. A video feed appeared. An older man sat tied to a chair. His face was tired, but Daniel recognized him instantly. William Harrison. His father was alive. Dad. Daniel shouted. William looked toward the camera. For the first time in years, father and son saw each other. Daniel. William whispered. Victor. Interrupted. Touching reunion. His smile disappeared. Now let's make a deal. Victor wanted the hard drives. Every piece of evidence. If Daniel handed them over, William would be released. If not, Victor didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The room fell silent. Daniel faced an impossible choice. Save his father, or expose Victor's criminal empire. Both seemed impossible. Then Ethan noticed something strange. The video feed wasn't perfectly live. There was a tiny delay. And in the background, he spotted something familiar. A large clock tower visible through a window. Ethan's eyes widened. I know where he is. Everyone turned toward him. What? Jake asked. Ethan pointed at the screen. The old Harrison clock tower. Daniel stared. The tower stood only a few miles from the original mansion. Victor had been hiding in plain sight. At that moment, Sarah smiled. For the first time all day. Then we still have a chance. Ethan quickly revealed a secret he had kept hidden. Back in the underground chamber, He had secretly copied all the evidence onto a second drive. Even if Victor got one copy, the truth would survive. Daniel looked at him in amazement. You planned for this? Ethan nodded. I had a feeling we'd need a backup. Outside, police sirens suddenly echoed in the distance. Sarah had secretly contacted a trusted federal investigator before leaving the farmhouse. Help was already on the way. Victor Kane didn't know it yet, but his empire was about to collapse. The final battle was coming, and it would decide everything. The sirens grew louder. Miles away, Victor Kane stood inside the old Harrison clock tower, unaware that federal agents were closing in from every direction. His attention remained fixed on Daniel and the evidence. He believed he had won. He was wrong. Inside the trapped cabin, Sarah found a hidden control panel behind a bookshelf. Years earlier, William Harrison had prepared the safe house for emergencies. After several tense minutes, the steel shutters unlocked. The door swung open. The group rushed outside. Waiting for them was a convoy of federal vehicles. Leading the operation was Agent Rebecca Cole, the investigator Sarah had contacted. We don't have much time, she said. Victor knows we're coming. The convoy raced toward the clock tower. As they approached, helicopters appeared overhead. Searchlights cut through the evening sky. Victor's men quickly realized something was wrong. Panic spread through the tower. Meanwhile, Daniel's father remained trapped inside. William Harrison had spent years hiding from Victor Kane. Now everything depended on a successful rescue. The agents surrounded the tower. Federal agents, come out with your hands up. Some of Victor's men surrendered immediately. Others tried to escape, but there was nowhere to run. Inside, Victor grabbed a bag containing cash, passports, and fake identities. He headed for a secret exit. Then he heard footsteps behind him. Daniel. For the first time in 15 years, Daniel stood face to face with the man who had destroyed his family. Victor smirked. You should have stayed hidden. Daniel stared back. You should have faced justice years ago. Victor tried to run, but Ethan and Jake appeared from another staircase. His escape route was blocked. Seconds later, agents stormed the room. Victor Kane was arrested. The criminal empire that had operated for decades was finally finished. Daniel rushed upstairs. There, tied to a chair, was William Harrison. Dad. William looked up. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Daniel hugged his father tightly. 15 years of separation. 15 years of pain. Finally over. Even the agents quietly stepped back to give them a moment. Over the next few weeks, the evidence from the hard drives exposed. Dozens of criminals connected to Victor Kane. Arrests were made across the country. News channels covered the story for months. William Harrison was praised for risking everything to protect the truth. Sarah Mitchell was officially cleared and able to return to normal life. But the biggest change happened to Ethan. One afternoon, William Harrison invited Ethan and his mother to the mansion. This time, Ethan wasn't nervous. When they sat down, William smiled. Do you remember the day you returned my wallet? Ethan nodded. I do. That decision changed more than you know. William explained that if Ethan had kept the wallet, none of the events that followed would have happened. The evidence might never have been found. Victor Kane might never have been stopped. Then William handed Ethan an envelope. Inside was a full scholarship to one of the best schools in the country. Every expense paid. Tuition, housing, books, everything. Ethan stared in disbelief. You earned this, William said. Not because you found my wallet. Because you chose honesty when it was difficult. Tears filled Ethan's mother's eyes. Years later, Ethan graduated with honors and became a successful investigative journalist. Inspired by everything he had experienced, he dedicated his life to uncovering the truth and helping others. Daniel rebuilt his relationship with his father. Jake became a respected engineer. Sarah finally lived without fear. And William Harrison spent his remaining years surrounded by the people he loved. Sometimes the smallest decisions create the biggest changes. A poor boy found a lost wallet. He could have walked away. He could have kept the money. Instead, he chose to do the right thing. And that single act of honesty changed countless lives forever.